let's go on and talk about that next layer of the pyramid.
When we think about building a framework, we're thinking about the common framework, and around that common framework is the things that we speak, the methodologies that we use, and of course some of the artifacts in which we would use within our methodology or templates. When we think about or talk about the need for a common language about requirements or the terminology, we need to think about the common approach of how we're going to speak to one another. We wouldn't try to choose, we wouldn't go and speak to someone of a different language that we didn't understand. And so why would we want to do that on project teams in the requirements development? The first thing I would suggest is coming up with a vocabulary that the team can agree on. And I would agree on this vocabulary up front. When Requisite Pro was first introduced at Dell, one of the interesting artifacts that I still use from time to time is the requirements management plan. It was nice because it identified and helped us as project teams document the vocabulary we're going to use in terms of requirements, how those requirements related to one another, and what the workflow was, or the framework from which a requirement grows from child to mature adult. So it provided the structure for documenting terminology, requirements taxonomy, and basically our hierarchies that we were going to use. And some teams would use it even to perform requirements activities by saying, here are the elicitation techniques that we're going to use. Next, I would identify what methods or techniques you will use to gather and elicit requirements. In the IIBA, the Business Analyst Body of Knowledge, has a wealth of techniques and guidance around requirements, elicitation, analysis, you name it, throw something at it. The BA Body of Knowledge has something in it. In fact, the software development lifecycle within Dell and our requirements processes, we bounced off our processes on the BA Body of Knowledge to make sure that we were using techniques and standards that were industry-wide and not just specific to the company. In terms of methodology, or basically a framework or a process, these frameworks and processes and methodologies really help us as practitioners and the organization become more repeatable. Simply put, if you have a process and it's not written down, it's not really a process because it's not repeatable. You should strive to have a framework that is consistent across the globe. That is, if a distributed team gets involved, first, and we read some requirement, that when we all read that, we all have a common understanding, if you will. But I would say this, agree first and upfront what methods and processes should be used. In the past, and some of you on the call have probably participated in, using the Rational Unified Process or even OpenUp, and that can be found in the Eclipse framework. Choose a framework that fits not just your style, but your organizational culture, your project culture, and also be prepared to work with the very experienced practitioners in your organization that have been very successful at their approaches, and these approaches may be good, but make sure that they align to the common methodology and framework. Include these assets and everyone who has a great understanding into reviewing and providing feedback loops into the methodology so that there's buy-in, if you will. Finally, when thinking about artifacts or templates, if you will, trying to put a common methodology in place is good, but remember, you don't have to create templates yourself. Find ones that are out there already. Carl Wiegers has a site. RUP has artifacts. Even the OpenUp framework has artifacts. There's so much content out there that there's no big need for us to go and reinvent the wheel. However, I will address that with any process that's in the industry, tweaks are needed. And the same is true for artifacts and templates. If there are small changes that need to be made, do that up front and make sure the team agrees of how the templates will be used. And make sure that everyone can agree on the structure. Make sure also that traceability is maintained from one requirement artifact to another. For example, if you have a vision scope document and a software requirement specification, you can create numbering schemas that would help lock the artifacts together. So for example, 1.0 would be a business objective, 1.1 would be a feature, and then 1.1.1 that's in your SRS would be your functional and non-functional requirement, maybe even a design constraint. As a part of the framework, basically have an agreed way of working together globally. And you can stick to your handy RM plan if you want to document it there.
That sounds great, Anthony. We really do have to work out how we're going to communicate together when we're in these global projects. So as a team, you need to decide something as simple as how are you going to talk? Do you use email, phone calls? Do you use instant messenger or video conferences? And then when you need to escalate, how do you go about doing that? So agree as a team on the appropriate ways to do that. Time differences can certainly be an issue, particularly when we're talking about different parts of the world. We often have different time zones that we're trying to communicate with our coworkers in. So you can't just do hallway conversations anymore, these impromptu meetings that we like to do. So instead, think about when you can schedule your meetings to accommodate all the different regions that need to be in the meeting. Maybe you pick one time a week where literally everyone can be in a single call, and that would suffice. Also, I should point out when you're scheduling these kinds of meetings, try and leave this 10-minute buffer to allow people to shift context and sort of prepare for the meeting that you're asking them to come to. Language barriers can certainly be a little bit challenging. Now, this may sound obvious, but talk slowly and clearly when you're dealing with coworkers who use English as a second language. Send them the written slides to look at ahead of time if you can. And in fact, give them a chance to reply after the meeting in email to either verify things that were decided or to answer any questions, because many people are just more comfortable working in text than verbally. This final point here around physical locations, this is a tricky one. When we do requirements workshops, we really do like to use the entire room. We want to have paper hanging on the walls that we're drawing on. We want to write things on the whiteboard. But when you have people who are on the phone, obviously they can't see those very well. Even if you have a camera, it's going to be really hard to have them be able to participate in that exercise. So it may help you to try these online collaborative tools. Sometimes just something simple to project slides will work, but often you might need something more like an online whiteboarding tool where you can actually draw on your computer screen and everybody can see it around the world. You also might want to try daily stand-up meetings. Just use a simple conference call for these. Even 10 minutes every single day will help get the entire team around the world on the same page and keep them from drifting off because they're not talking to one another.